The warning that changed everything. Commander Sarah Chen was reviewing the morning reports at Luna Station when every communication device in the facility began screaming at once. Not the usual alerts or emergency signals, but something else entirely. A sound that seemed to bypass the ears and go straight to the brain, carrying with it an unmistakable message of terror. "Commander," Technician Rodriguez called from his station, his voice cracking with confusion. "We're receiving a transmission on frequencies we didn't even know existed. It's not from Earth." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. After decades of searching the stars for signs of intelligent life, humanity had always wondered what first contact would look like. She had never imagined it would sound like a scream of pure panic. The main screen flickered to life, displaying static that gradually resolved into an image that would be burned into human memory forever. A tall, reptilian being with golden scales and large, frightened eyes stared back at them. Behind the creature, Sarah could see others of different species running in obvious terror. "People of Earth," the being spoke, its voice translated by technology humans had never seen before. "I am Ambassador Crix of the Stellar Confederacy. We have monitored your species for some time, but protocol demanded we wait until you achieved interstellar travel before making contact. However, circumstances have forced our hand." Sarah grabbed the communication console. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. Are you in distress? Do you need assistance?" The reptilian's eyes widened with what appeared to be disbelief. "Assistance? No, human. We bring morning. The Devourers approach your system. They will arrive in 72 of your hours. You must evacuate immediately." Dr. Marcus Webb, the station's chief xenobiologist, pushed forward to the screen. His life's work had been preparing for this moment, though not under these circumstances. "Ambassador Crix, we need more information. What are these Devourers? Why must we evacuate?" Crix's scaled hands trembled as he activated a device. Holographic images filled the transmission, showing dead worlds stripped of all life, space filled with debris that had once been thriving civilizations, and massive dark ships that seemed to absorb light itself. "The Devourers are consumption incarnate," Crix explained, his voice hollow. "They travel from system to system, stripping worlds of all organic matter. Nothing survives their passage. 47 civilizations have fallen to them in the past 1,000 years. Every species that encounters them has the same choice: flee or die." Sarah stared at the images of destruction. Entire planets reduced to barren rock, magnificent cities turned to dust, billions of lives simply gone. How many species have chosen to fight? There was a long pause. Crix exchanged glances with other beings visible in the background. "Fight? Commander Chen, no species fights the Devourers. It is impossible. They are death itself." "That wasn't my question," Sarah pressed. "How many have tried?" "None," Crix admitted quietly. "In 10,000 years of recorded galactic history, no species has ever chosen to stand against them. The moment the Devourers are detected, entire civilizations pack whatever they can carry and flee to distant stars." Dr. Webb leaned forward, his scientific mind racing. "What's their weakness? There must be something. No species, no matter how powerful, is invincible." Crix's expression became almost pitying. "Doctor, you think like a scientist. You seek patterns, weaknesses, solutions. This is admirable but futile. The Devourers have no weakness because they are not truly alive as we understand it. They are a collective consciousness that consumes life force itself. They cannot be reasoned with, bargained with, or defeated." General Patricia Hayes had arrived during the conversation, her weathered face grim as she absorbed the information. "Ambassador, you mentioned evacuation. What exactly are you offering?" "The Confederacy maintains emergency evacuation protocols," Crix replied. "We can transport approximately 50 million of your people to sanctuary worlds. New colonies can be established. Your species can survive." The number hit the room like a physical blow. 50 million. Out of Earth's 8 billion inhabitants, less than 1%, General Hayes said quietly, "You're asking us to abandon 99% of humanity to save the species." "It is the only way," Crix insisted. "Every species faces this choice. Some refuse evacuation entirely and perish with their worlds. Others accept the bitter necessity of survival. There is no third option." Sarah looked around the command center at the faces of her crew. These were people who had dedicated their lives to protecting Earth and humanity. The idea of abandoning their world, their families, everyone they had ever known, was unthinkable. "How long do we have to decide?" she asked. "You must begin evacuations within 24 hours to complete the process before the Devourers arrive. I will transmit the coordinates for the evacuation sites. Choose quickly and choose wisely. This is not a decision that can be unmade." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Outside the viewports, Earth hung in space like a blue jewel, beautiful and fragile and home to everything humanity had ever known or loved. Dr. Webb was the first to speak. "We need to contact Earth immediately. The world leaders need to know what we're facing." General Hayes nodded grimly. "I'll contact the Global Defense Council. They'll want to verify this information." But she gestured at the recorded images of dead worlds still displayed on the screens. "This doesn't look like something you can fake." Over the next 18 hours, Luna Station became the center of the most important conversation in human history. World leaders, scientists, military commanders, and philosophers joined emergency sessions that continued around the clock. The debates were fierce, the emotions raw. President Martins of the American Federation argued for accepting the evacuation. "We have a moral obligation to preserve our species. 50 million people carrying forward human culture, knowledge, and values is better than 8 billion graves." Prime Minister Singh of the Asian Alliance disagreed. "How do we choose who lives and who dies? What gives us the right to abandon billions of innocent people? We would be carrying forward a humanity built on the ultimate betrayal." Chancellor Müller of the European Coalition presented data and projections. "Even if we accept evacuation, there's no guarantee these sanctuary worlds will remain safe. If the Devourers continue expanding, they'll eventually reach wherever we flee. We'd only be delaying the inevitable." As the debates rage, reports came in from around the world. Religious leaders spoke of humanity's duty to stand together. Scientists worked frantically to analyze the limited data about the Devourers. Military planners ran scenarios that all ended the same way: total defeat. Commander Chen found herself in the middle of it all, somehow becoming humanity's unofficial liaison with the Stellar Confederacy. Ambassador Crix contacted her regularly, growing increasingly agitated as the hours passed. "Commander Chen, your species must decide. The evacuation ships are in position, but they cannot wait much longer. The Devourers will arrive in 36 hours. Sarah looked at the ambassador's reptilian features, trying to read the emotions there. "Crix, in all your species' history, has any civilization ever regretted running?" The question seemed to surprise him. "Regret? Commander, the alternative to running is extinction. The dead do not experience regret." "That's not what I asked. Of the survivors, the evacuees who left their worlds behind, do they consider their sacrifice worthwhile?" Crix was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer. "The gathered survivors, as we call them, often speak of phantom pain. They dream of skies they will never see again, of places that exist only in memory. Some say they died the day they left their worlds, that what survived was merely an echo of what they had been." "But they survived," Sarah pressed. "Yes," Crix agreed. "They survived. Is that not enough?" Sarah thought of her daughter Emma, safe in school in New Angeles, of her elderly parents in their retirement home in Montana, of the 8 billion human souls who would never see tomorrow if they accepted evacuation, of the 47 dead civilizations whose survivors lived with phantom pain and the knowledge that they had abandoned everything they loved. "Crix," she said finally, What if there was a third option? The ambassador's eyes widened with alarm. Commander, you cannot be considering. What if we fought? It is suicide. Crix's voice rose in panic. Commander, I have seen the records. The Devourers are not simply powerful, they are inevitable. They are force of nature, like gravity or entropy. You do not fight such things, you accept them. Dr. Webb had been quietly analyzing the Devourer data during the conversation. He looked up from his console with an expression Sarah had never seen before. Not hope exactly, but something like scientific curiosity mixed with desperate determination. Sarah, he said quietly, what if he's wrong? What if no one has ever fought them because no one has ever been crazy enough to try? General Hayes joined them at the communication station. Marcus has been showing me the tactical data. The Devourers are powerful, but they follow predictable patterns. They've never faced resistance because every species runs. They may not know how to handle a coordinated defense. Ambassador Crix listened to this exchange with growing horror. You speak of madness. In 10,000 years, no species has been foolish enough to attempt what you suggest. There is a reason for this wisdom. Sarah looked at her colleagues, then back at the frightened alien on the screen. Maybe that's exactly why it might work. The final decision came at hour 23. The Global Defense Council had heard all arguments, reviewed all data, and consulted with experts around the world. When President Martinez called for the vote, the result was closer than anyone expected. 51% in favor of evacuation, 49% for standing and fighting. But as the votes were tallied, something unexpected happened. Reports began flooding in from around the world. Civilian populations were organizing, not to flee, but to help. Engineers were volunteering to work on defense systems. Scientists were sharing research freely. Military personnel were requesting transfers to Earth defense positions rather than evacuation duty. The Brazilian delegate stood up during the final session. The vote may say evacuation, but the people are saying something different. Maybe democracy isn't just about counting votes. Maybe it's about listening to the soul of a people. The Australian representative agreed. My citizens are asking what kind of species abandons their world without a fight. They're saying they'd rather die human than live as something else. One by one, delegates began changing their votes. Not because the tactical situation had improved, but because they realized that some choices transcend logic. Some stands must be taken regardless of odds. When the final tally was announced, the vote was unanimous. Humanity would stand and fight. Commander Chen opened the channel to Ambassador Crix one last time. The reptilian looked exhausted and deeply troubled. Ambassador, please convey our gratitude to the Stellar Confederacy for the evacuation offer. However, humanity has decided to decline. Crix's scaled hands covered his face. Commander Chen, this is not courage. This is collective suicide. Your species will be remembered as the most beautiful tragedy in galactic history. Maybe, Sarah admitted, but we'll be remembered as humans. And if we're going to die fighting for the place we call home. The transmission ended with Crix staring at her in a mixture of admiration and grief. Within hours, the Confederacy evacuation ships departed, leaving humanity alone with 72 hours to prepare for the impossible. As reports of the decision spread across Earth, something remarkable happened. The panic that many had expected never materialized. Instead, there was a sense of unity unlike anything in human history. Political differences were set aside. Ancient rivalries were forgotten. Religious and cultural barriers dissolved in the face of a common threat. Dr. Webb stood beside Commander Chen on Luna Station's observation deck, watching Earth turn slowly below them. The planet looked the same as always, but somehow it felt different. It felt like home in a way it never had before. Do you think we have a chance? He asked quietly. Sarah thought of the dead worlds in the Confederacy's records, of 47 civilizations that had chosen evacuation over resistance. Then she thought of 8 billion humans preparing to make a stand that no species in galactic history had ever attempted. I don't know, she admitted. "But I know that in 48 hours, the Devourers are going to discover something no other species has ever shown them." "What's that?" Sarah smiled grimly, her reflection ghost-like in the viewport. "What happens when prey fights back?" The stand that shook the galaxy. Captain Jake Morrison had always dreamed of being the first human to engage alien technology in combat. As he strapped himself into the cockpit of the hastily modified fighter craft, he realized this wasn't quite how he had imagined it would happen. "Phoenix Squadron, this is Luna Control." Commander Chen's voice crackled through his headset. "Enemy contact in 6 hours. All squadrons report readiness status." Jake ran his hands over the unfamiliar controls. In the past 48 hours, human engineers had worked around the clock to integrate Confederacy shield technology with Earth's existing defense systems. The result was unprecedented cooperation between human ingenuity and alien science, though nobody knew if it would actually work. "Phoenix leader to Luna Control, squadron ready," he replied, trying to keep the uncertainty out of his voice. Around him, 23 other fighters hung in space, each one representing months of training compressed into 2 days of desperate preparation. Back on Earth, engineer Lynn Rodriguez was making final adjustments to the planetary defense grid. The massive orbital platforms had been designed to defend against human threats, but over the past 2 days, they had been transformed into something entirely new. Confederacy energy weapons had been mounted alongside human railguns, creating hybrid systems that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. "Rodriguez to Central Command," she said into her headset while her hands flew over the control interface. "Grid Alpha is online and synchronized. I'm reading green across all sectors." "Copy that, Rodriguez. How are our power levels?" Lynn checked her readings and felt her stomach drop. "We're running at 112% of rated capacity. The Confederacy tech is more power-hungry than we calculated. We can maintain full defensive fire for maybe 30 minutes before we start losing systems." 30 minutes. General Hayes' voice came through the channel. "Then we better make them count." Dr. Webb was in the analysis center, surrounded by screens showing data streams from sensors positioned throughout the solar system. He had been studying the Devourer's approach pattern for hours, looking for anything that might give humanity an edge. "I'm seeing something interesting," he announced to the tactical team. "The Devourer formation isn't random. They're moving in a perfect geometric pattern, like they're following some kind of mathematical rule." Commander Chen joined him at the display. "What kind of rule?" "That's what bothers me. It's almost like they're not individuals making tactical decisions. They move like they're all part of the same organism. A hive mind. More than that. Look at this." Webb pulled up a comparison chart. Every recorded encounter with the Devourer shows the exact same approach pattern, the same formation, the same timing. It's as if they're not adapting to local conditions at all. Sarah felt a spark of something that might have been hope. "You're saying they might not know how to adjust if they encounter something unexpected." "I'm saying they've never had to adjust. Every species they've encountered has reacted the same way. Panic, evacuation, no resistance. They may not even have protocols for dealing with organized defense." The conversation was interrupted by an alarm that sent chills through everyone in the command center. The long-range sensors had detected the Devourer fleet at the edge of the solar system. "Contact," the sensor operator called out. "Multiple bogies, bearing 27 Mark IV. Distance, 4 AU and closing. Count is..." "Jesus, I'm reading over 300 individual ships." The main screen displayed the approaching fleet, and for a moment, the command center fell silent. The Devourer ships were unlike anything in human experience. They seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating dark voids in space that hurt to look at directly. They moved with perfect coordination, maintaining formation with mathematical precision. "All stations, this is command." General Hayes' voice carried across all channels. "The enemy has arrived. All personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill." Across the Earth-Luna system, Humans took their positions. Fighter squadrons launched from hidden bases on the Moon and in the asteroid belt. Orbital defense platforms powered up weapons that had never been tested in combat. Ground-based installations prepared for the possibility that some devourers might reach the surface. But perhaps most remarkably, civilian populations weren't cowering in bunkers. Instead, they were actively participating in the defense. Amateur radio operators had created a planet-wide communication network. Engineers who weren't needed for military operations had volunteered to maintain power grids and support systems. Even children had been organized into teams to help spot any threats that made it through the outer defenses. Ambassador Crix's final transmission had been received an hour ago. The Confederacy fleet had withdrawn to a safe distance to observe what they believed would be humanity's final moments. His message had been brief and sorrowful. "We will remember your species with honor. May your deaths be swift." As the Devourer fleet crossed into the outer solar system, something unprecedented in galactic history began to unfold. Instead of finding a fleeing population and empty worlds, the Devourers encountered a coordinated defense that met them at every level. The first engagement came when the alien fleet reached the asteroid belt. Hidden among the rocks were human mining stations that had been converted into weapons platforms. As the Devourers passed, expecting no resistance, they were suddenly hit by coordinated fire from dozens of concealed positions. Direct hits on enemy formation. Captain Morrison reported from Phoenix Squadron's position. "They're taking damage, but they're not breaking off. Maintaining course and speed." Confirmed damage on multiple enemy vessels. Dr. Webb added from his analysis station. "Their formation is unchanged, though. They're not adapting to the threat." This was exactly what Webb had hoped for, and exactly what terrified him. The Devourers were powerful enough to absorb significant damage and continue their approach, but they weren't learning from the attacks. They continued in their predetermined pattern, as if the resistance didn't exist. The real test came when the alien fleet encountered the main defensive line established between Mars and Earth. Here, humanity had concentrated every weapon, every shield, every desperate innovation they could devise. Enemy fleet entering weapons range. Lynn Rodriguez reported from her position controlling the defense grid. "All platforms show ready. Permission to engage." "Permission granted," Commander Chen replied. "Give them everything we have." The space between Mars and Earth erupted in light as humanity's combined firepower struck the Devourer fleet. Confederacy energy weapons created brilliant lances of coherent light that cut through the darkness. Human railguns fired projectiles at relativistic speeds. Missile batteries launched swarms of guided weapons that filled space with explosions. For the first time in 10,000 years of galactic history, the Devourers faced coordinated, sustained resistance. The results were immediate and shocking. Devourer ships that had seemed invincible began to buckle under the assault. Their dark hulls cracked, spilling strange organic matter into space. Some ships simply disintegrated under concentrated fire, while others began to drift, apparently disabled. "We're hurting them." Captain Morrison's voice cracked with excitement. "Multiple enemy ships destroyed or disabled. The formation is starting to break up." But the celebration was premature. The surviving Devourer ships began to change, adapting in ways that no other species had ever forced them to develop. They spread out, making themselves harder targets. Their movement patterns became less predictable. Most disturbing of all, they began to coordinate their attacks in new ways. "They're learning," Dr. Webb observed with fascination and terror. "They're actually adapting their tactics in real time." The adapted Devourers hit back with devastating force. Energy beams that seemed to consume matter itself lashed out at the human defense platforms. Several orbital stations simply vanished, not destroyed but somehow unmade at the molecular level. "We're losing platforms 7 through 12, Lynn Rodriguez reported, her voice tight with stress. "Power grid is holding, but barely. Estimated time to system failure, 18 minutes. Commander Chen felt the weight of 8 billion lives pressing down on her shoulders. The plan was working better than anyone had dared hope, but it might not be enough. The Devourers were adapting faster than humanity could respond. That's when something happened that changed everything. Engineer Martinez, working at a communication station, suddenly looked up with wide eyes. "Commander, I'm receiving transmissions on Confederacy frequencies. Multiple ships, incoming fast." The tactical display updated to show new contacts approaching from the outer system. Not Devourers, but Confederacy vessels. Ships that should have been light years away, safely observing humanity's final stand. Ambassador Crix's voice came through the communication system, but it sounded different than before. Gone was the resigned fatalism. In its place was something that might have been wonder. "Commander Chen, this is Crix. We could not leave. No species in our recorded history has ever damaged a Devourer fleet. You have done something that was supposed to be impossible. Crix, you need to get your people out of here. We can't protect you." "Commander, you misunderstand. We are not here to be protected. We are here to help you fight." The Confederacy fleet, led by Crix's ship, dove into the battle with an enthusiasm that shocked everyone, including themselves. These were beings from species that had fled the Devourers for millennia, and now they were choosing to fight. But they weren't the only ones. Reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. Other species that had encountered the Devourers were turning their evacuation fleets around. Ancient enemies were setting aside grudges to join the battle. The impossible was happening. The tide of battle began to turn. Human ingenuity combined with Confederacy technology and the desperate courage of species that had lived in fear for centuries. The Devourers, for all their power and adaptability, had never faced anything like this coordinated resistance. Multiple enemy ships withdrawing. Captain Morrison reported, his voice filled with disbelief. "Repeat, enemy fleet is withdrawing. They're actually retreating." But Dr. Webb was studying his sensors with growing concern. "Sarah, look at this. The Devourers aren't just retreating. They're sending out some kind of signal." A communication burst directed toward deep space. Communication to who? I don't know, but it's powerful enough to reach other galaxies. Commander Chen felt a chill as she realized what this might mean. They're calling for help. This isn't over. This is just the beginning. Ambassador Crix appeared on the communication screen, his reptilian features showing exhaustion and something that looked like joy. "Commander Chen, what your species has accomplished today will be remembered forever. You have shown the galaxy that the Devourers can be defeated. At what cost? Crix. If they bring reinforcements, then we will meet them together." Today, humanity taught the galaxy something we had forgotten, that some things are worth fighting for, regardless of the odds. As the immediate battle ended and damage reports came in, the scope of what had happened began to become clear. Humanity had lost 12% of its defense platforms and 43 fighter craft. The casualties were heartbreaking, but far less than anyone had feared. More importantly, they had destroyed or disabled nearly 60% of the Devourer fleet. Ships that had seemed invincible had been reduced to drifting hulks. The survivors were fleeing toward deep space, wounded and apparently calling for reinforcements. But perhaps most significant of all was what had happened to the galaxy itself. The Confederacy species that had joined the fight were already talking about forming a real alliance, not just a loose cooperation for evacuation purposes. Ancient weapons were being brought out of storage. Defensive pacts were being discussed. Captain Morrison docked his fighter at Luna Station with hands that still shook from adrenaline. As he climbed out of the cockpit, he was met by a crowd of engineers and technicians who had worked around the clock to make the defense possible. "Did we really do it?" one of them asked. "Did we actually beat them?" Jake looked out at the debris field that marked where the Devourer fleet had been broken, then at Earth hanging beautiful and intact in the distance. "We did something nobody thought was possible. We made them bleed." In the weeks that followed, the galaxy changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The defeat of a Devourer fleet sent shockwaves through civilizations that had lived in fear for millennia. Species that had been preparing evacuation plans began investing in defense systems instead. Humanity found itself at the center of a new galactic alliance, not because they were the strongest or most advanced species, but because they had been willing to do what no one else would: stand and fight when running was the logical choice. Ambassador Crix established a permanent embassy on Luna Station, working with human leaders to share technology and coordinate defenses. During one of their regular meetings, he asked Commander Chen the question that had been bothering him since the battle. "Commander, I must know, how did your species find the courage to make a stand that our greatest warriors considered impossible?" Sarah looked out at Earth, where 8 billion humans were going about their daily lives on a world that had almost been lost. "I think it's because we never learned that some things are impossible. We've always been too stubborn to accept that we can't win." Dr. Webb, who was present for the meeting, added his own perspective. Every species in the galaxy learned the same lesson from the Devourers: run or die. But humanity learned a different lesson from our own history. Sometimes you fight not because you can win, but because some things are worth dying for. The communication alert interrupted their conversation. The long-range sensors had detected something at the edge of the galaxy. Something massive. The Devourers' call for help had been answered. "How many ships are we looking at?" General Hayes asked grimly. The sensor operator checked his readings twice before answering. "Thousands, General. Maybe tens of thousands. It's the largest fleet ever recorded." Commander Chen stood up, feeling the familiar weight of impossible choices, but this time she wasn't facing them alone. Across the galaxy, hundreds of species were preparing for a battle that would determine the fate of all organic life. "Send a message to all Confederacy worlds," she ordered. "Tell them that humanity extends an invitation to any species willing to fight for their right to exist. Earth will be the rallying point." As the massive Devourer reinforcement fleet began its approach, something unprecedented in galactic history was taking shape. Not evacuation, not surrender, but a coalition of the willing prepared to make a stand for everything they held dear. The Battle of Earth had ended, but the war for the galaxy was just beginning. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the prey was no longer running.